Now, every day there seems to be a new AI tool, a new model, a new agent framework, or some new feature everyone is suddenly talking about. And after a while, keeping up with all of it can start to feel like a job on its own. You open YouTube, LinkedIn, or X, and somebody is talking about the latest release. Another person says it changed everything. Then somebody else tells you the tool you're already using is outdated. And before you know it, you start wondering if you are falling behind, even though you are already using AI every day. If that sounds familiar, you are definitely not the only one. But here's the thing, you probably do not need most of those tools. And I actually think constantly switching between AI tools can make you less productive, not more. What you really need is a small group of tools that you understand well and that actually help you the work you need to do. Here's what tends to happen. You find the tool you like, you spend some time learning it, you figure out how to use it in your workflow. Maybe you build prompts around it, connect to other systems, or start using it in your team. And then 2 weeks later, another tool comes out, and an influencer posts a really impressive demo about their new tool. And suddenly you find yourself thinking, should I switch? The problem is that switching has cost. You have to learn another interface. Now you have to understand how the tool behaves. You have to figure out its limitations. And if you're building actual systems around it, you might also have to change APIs, prompts, integrations, documentation, and testing. Sometimes that's absolutely worth doing, but sometimes you spend hours switching tools just to end up solving the same problem you were already solving. That's not necessarily progress. Personally, I would rather know 4 or 5 tools really well than constantly jump between 20 different platforms. Because there is real value in spending enough time with a tool to understand how it behaves. Take an AI model, for example. After you use an AI model for a certain time, you start learning what kind of instructions work well. You learn when it needs more context. You learn where it tends to make mistakes. You learn when you should ask for structured output. And probably more importantly, you learn when not to trust the answer without verifying it. The same thing happens with an automation platform like n8n. At first, you might just be learning how to connect different nodes together, right? But after using it for a while, then you start thinking about retries, proper error handling, concurrency, webhooks, failed executions, and recovery. That knowledge compounds over time. And every time you completely switch platforms, part of that learning starts over. So instead of always asking, what is the newest tool? I think the better question is, does this newest tool solve a problem I actually have? That's the question we should be asking. Because for most people, a relatively small AI stack is probably enough. Maybe you have one tool you use for general AI work, one for coding, one for research, and one for automation. That's already a very capable setup. Maybe you use ChatGPT or Claude for general work and thinking through problems. Maybe Claude Code, Codex, or another coding agent is what you use when you are working inside a software project. Maybe you have a research tool when you need current information and sources. And maybe something like n8n handles automation and systems integration. The specific tools are not really the point. Your stack could be completely different. The important part is not a tool, is that each tool has a job. If the tools you already have cover the problems you regularly need to solve, you probably do not need another 10 tools or platforms doing slightly different versions of the same thing. One thing I think helps a lot is thinking in terms of capabilities instead of tools. So instead of asking, which AI platform should I use, ask, what am I actually trying to do? Do I need research, coding assistance, automation, document analysis, image generation, an AI model inside an application? Once you think that way in terms of capability instead of tools, evaluating new tools becomes much easier. Because when something new comes out, you can ask, does this give me a capability I do not already have? Or does it make something I already do significantly better? If the answer is no, you probably do not need to change anything. And I'm definitely not saying you should ignore new technology. AI is moving very quickly, and some new tools really are worth testing, but there should be a reason. I would look at a few things. First, does it solve an actual problem? Not a problem that maybe you will have 6 months from now, something you are dealing with today. Is that tool capable of solving that problem? Second question I would ask is it meaningfully better than what you already use? So if a new tool saves you 10 seconds on something you do once a week, switching may not make sense. But if it turns a process that normally takes an hour into 10 minutes, now it's worth paying attention. Third, what's the cost of adopting it? And I do not just mean the subscription price. There is the time to learn it, migration, integrations, team training, security, documentation. And if you are using it inside a production system, the switching cost can be much higher. You may have, for example, APIs, authentication, monitoring, data privacy requirements, or other systems depending on it. That's why when I build AI systems, I also try to avoid making the entire architecture depending on one provider whenever possible. If you can put an abstraction layer between your application and the AI provider, testing another model becomes much easier because now you can experiment without rebuilding the whole application. So new does not automatically mean better. And this is something that gets lost in all these AI noise. A new model can perform better on certain benchmarks and still make almost no difference to your actual workflow. Maybe the model you already use does the job perfectly well. And sometimes the model is not even the real problem. Maybe the problem is that bad data, poor instructions, unreliable APIs, weak workflow design, no monitoring, or a business process that was never clearly defined in the first place. In that case, changing AI models is not going to fix those things. I see the same thing with AI agents. Sometimes people are searching for a new agent framework when what they really need is a better workflow. A few API calls, some deterministic logic, and one well-placed AI step might actually be a much more reliable system. The tool should follow the problem, not the other way around. And I think this is probably the biggest takeaway. You are allowed to ignore AI tools. Give yourself permission to ignore new tools. You do not need an account on every platform unless, of course, you are a creator and you do that for a living and you want to create demos of all the tools and show to your audience. Unless you're a creator, it really doesn't make sense to be opening accounts into all these new platforms. You do not need to test every model on the day it launches. And you definitely do not need to rebuild your workflow because somebody posted a good demo on YouTube. Pay attention to what's happening, stay informed, and when something looks genuinely useful, test it against a real problem. If it's better, use it. If it's not, move on. There will be probably another tool next week anyway. AI is moving too fast for anybody to realistically master everything. So find the tools that work for you, learn them properly, understand what they're good at, understand where they fall short, and only change your stack when there is actually a good reason to. Because knowing how to solve problems with AI is going to matter a lot more than knowing the name of every single AI tool that launched this week. Let me know in the comments how many AI tools you actually use every week and which ones have earned a permanent place in your workflow. That said, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.